Hey guys, Omar here, and today we're going podcast style. That's right. Grab some tea, get coffee, maybe a little popcorn. We're going to go a little longer today because it's going to be story time today. I'm going to talk about what it was like to be part of Fujifilm's launch of 4 of their products back in May. Now, we'll also talk a little bit about how I was compensated for this and how I wasn't compensated for this, and it opens up an interesting discussion about who's getting the better end of the deal, Fujifilm or me. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts below after you listen to this entire podcast episode. And by the way, this is a podcast. I actually have a podcast that I don't maintain well, but I'll link it up below and I'll be posting this episode there as well. So it started with a little email from Fujifilm asking if I wanted to be part of the new camera launch. And the first thing that goes through your mind is yes. It's always an exciting opportunity to sort of work with camera companies and show what you can do. And it also kind of validates what you do because they're reaching out to you because they like what you do. So how are you going to say no to that? Then the second thought that goes through your mind is, okay, what's the compensation? Because I have a business, I run a full-time photography business. So in your mind, you calculate, sure, let's do this. What are the numbers? What are we talking about here? And right away, I was told that, yeah, we'll cover your expenses for what the content we're creating, but there isn't really you're not getting paid for this. We just want to give you the cameras and help you create what you want to create. So bottom line is this is something I had to decide if I was going to do. If I was going to help promote this camera or show what it can do without any compensation. And it's a little tricky thing, but I kind of, in a leap of faith, said, you know what? Number one, I really wouldn't be where I am here, a YouTube channel, without Fujifilm, just for starters, number one. I know I've sold a lot of Fujifilm XT20, XT30 cameras out there. So number one, I thought that I have a little bit of a loyalty sort of, appreciation for the brand. That's number one. And number two, personally, where I was during this time, I was kind of in a creative rut where I didn't feel like I was making anything exciting. I was kind of sitting in front of the TV a lot, just, watching movies, and there was no push to create. And I think this in May, when it happened in May, I think it was the perfect kick that I needed to sort of, when you're forced to create, it sort of really motivates you and lights a nice little fire under your butt. So here was the premise from Fujifilm. Their idea was to get some creators, and the creators were myself and Jeffrey Sun, this young photographer that is very talented, and his pictures are great, and he's very cool. We'll talk about him a little bit more. But grab these 2 photographers, give them the new gear, and watch them create what they want to create. And in the meanwhile, Fujifilm would video us. They actually would capture us creating. And then all of this was based on a B&H photo panel that we were going to be on. So that B&H was sort of going to use our photos and this video that was being made of us creating for this panel. And that was the other part of it. We were going to be part of a live panel to talk about what it was like using the cameras. And by the way, this did happen. I'll link that up below if you want to watch an hour-long panel about, the cameras. Now, I think the marketing team had a good idea here, which is instead of the usual, which is an ambassador kind of telling you how great the camera is and maybe just spitting out the specs and what they, quote, love about the camera, it was better to give it to people who maybe are just trying it for the first time, me, and aren't ambassadors, are kind of just like, here, take this and create what you can and then tell us how it was. It was more what you guys usually say you want to see more of, which is, hey, let's see people creating photographs, making videos with these cameras, because all the release videos for cameras are becoming cookie cutter. And it's the same video over and over, just, telling us the specs. So I always like that, to see channels that are actually creating photographs from the gear they receive. Now, by the way, on top of all of this, Fujifilm rented a helicopter. They didn't know how it was going to fit into everything, but definitely we were going to go up and fly over the city. So on top of creating, people filming us, a live panel, now we got to go strap in and go over the city and, I don't know, try to create up there. So that the first production meeting was like, hey, this is the big idea. Take a day, we'll meet again, and then we'll hash everything out. And what's crazy is we had a film crew. We have a director, we have a sound guy, we have production assistants, there's a van, there's like this whole team. And I'm so used to doing everything just myself, being cameraman, audio guy, production assistant. So it was interesting to work with a team. So the first thing I had to decide was, what was I going to create? What was I going to be captured doing? And I came up with, believe it or not, it was during one of the Zoom calls where someone mentioned coffee, which sparked this whole snowball of an idea that I would be using the Fujifilm XT50 and capturing the city, but also having more and more coffee, which would showcase the main thing that Fujifilm wanted showcased with the camera, which was the film simulation dial. And how, as I drank more and more caffeine, that was the idea in the video, is that I would just start using the film simulations more and more, and the video would speed up, was the idea I had. So then we have our final Zoom production meeting before we're about to go shoot, probably the day before or 2 days prior. And I have my coffee idea already. And what's funny is, as the meeting's going on, I'm noticing that they're going in a different direction. The direction they're going in is they want to film Jeffrey and I together using the cameras and sort of having like a photo challenge, which is something that's been done before. And it's a good idea. The only problem is, with any photo challenge, it just raises the stakes of being able to capture anything good. And I know creatively, when I create photographs, I actually need a little bit more time. I have to quietly think and line things up with my eyes. I'm not going to run around and like walk up to people and be like, hey, can I do a portrait of you? Or maybe we're both of us competing, capturing the color red in New York, which would be fun. But again, I think the stakes were higher there. So I actually met with Jeffrey alone, and we discussed what we kind of wanted to do. And what was great about talking about the project was that Jeffrey was going in a totally different direction than I was. And so that worked out, because his idea was to film him capturing photos about New York because of what New York meant to him. And me, as the idiot over here trying to make a funny video, we definitely were in like two different camps. And it turns out, in perfect hindsight, that Jeffrey and I were perfectly paired together. Hip, cool, young, aspiring artist, young guy, and old, goofy me. And it was just a great pairing. We got along so great. And I'll link up his video below as well. He did a fantastic job with his video. But the idea was that we would be captured a little bit separate and together using the cameras. I think that's what we kind of came up with. But the logistics was really hard, because the director wanted to capture us and we had to capture what we needed, and it all had to be done in a day or two. All right, good. So we got a seahorse. Ooh. Did I touch that? Yes. Delicious. But again, this situation was totally like constantly evolving, and everyone involved was just game for anything. They really wanted us to create. That was the best thing. No one was forcing us to do anything that we didn't want to do. And this is just kudos to the director, David Geffin. He had a little Fujifilm X-H2 with the super long cinema lens on it, and he made us look so good on there. And his job was to capture the stuff for B&H, and he also had to put up with us sort of, hey, I need to film this thing for my video while you film your stuff for your video. Now, we did need something for B&H that Jeffrey and I both were doing. So we had our own videos, but then we also had to come up with something, not the challenge, that we were doing together. So I kind of just fell back to something I just was shooting all the time. It's an ongoing project anyway. I also made a video about this, link it up below. But it's slices, where you use, I've talked about it before on the channel, but you use a telephoto lens to capture an abstract or piece of a building, some kind of composition that, you know, is interesting to the eye based on shape or light or color. And so I told this to Jeffrey, and he was like, oh, that's great. That's going to be really cool to create art, and it's safe. We can actually look for slices in New York. We could do it together with the GFX 100S. The GFX 100S is perfect for it. It's a high megapixel camera that captures all the little detail. And so we were safe there. We like but now we have to capture slices, work on our own video, the coffee video, and also make sure that the director, David, is getting everything he needs for B&H. So day one, the call time was sunrise. And what was great was that Jeffrey went on the Staten Island ferry to start the project at sunrise. And I arrived in New York around sunrise and was by myself shooting with the GFX. So here I got to kind of walk around and get slices of New York while Jeffrey was kind of doing his own thing on the ferry and capturing stuff for his project. And then we all met in downtown New York, where I started to work on my project, which was the coffee house. Now, I scouted a bunch of coffee houses to go visit, and I wanted the most interesting, beautiful coffee houses. And the idea was to get people to create latte art for me. And using the Fujifilm XT50, I would be able to, capture beautiful, overhead shots of the coffee and the coffee houses. That was the idea. And I knew I could, hash that out. But I also had to video myself while David was videoing me, videoing myself. It was very meta. And what was cool is Fujifilm gave me I got to borrow a Fujifilm XS20, which films in open gate. And I knew I wanted to film the whole thing in open gate for the first time. My first open gate video. And what was funny is I didn't have an XT50 at all before day one. I didn't know what the camera looked like. I didn't know, anything about it except what we got on the press release thing. So I actually had to borrow one that Jeffrey had and set it up for myself the way I set up my Fujifilm and use that camera with my own SD card. So that was pretty interesting. It was like, okay, action. Use this camera you've never used before. But luckily I have a lot of experience in setting up the cameras. And the first coffee, this was the big sort of dilemma, was that we didn't have permission to go into any of the coffee places. We sort of had to do like guerrilla filming. And the first coffee house, this was the idea that I would go in first. And this was all David's idea, the director. He said, all right, you go in first, Omar. Oh, by the way, he has like the most awesome British accent. He's like, okay, Omar, first you go in and then you call me. It was great. I just could listen to that all day. Let me know what you want me to do.
Yeah, rolling. I think just the rotation of that rotary dial again, the little...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's great, Omar.
But anyway, I went in first and I was like, yes, I'll take a coffee and a croissant. And then David would come in after with his camera and it's like, hey, what are you doing here? Hey, you want a coffee? And we would sit down, and then that was the idea, is that he would film me sort of, photographing my croissant and the coffees. And that's how we kind of got through the first coffee house. But honestly, I think they didn't even care. They know that people go into that beautiful, it's called the Conwell Coffee House, which is really beautiful. And I think they just know that people go in and take pictures there. So, but it was pretty funny how we had this whole thing set up. Now, the other thing I found interesting that I learned about this working with a crew is how much slower stuff is when you're doing it professionally. It is a process with the, getting mic'd up and making sure the sound is right, backup sound. We have, the director sort of making sure he's planning the shot. And so everything takes a long time. And what was funny was David was setting everything up and things. I'm so used to doing everything fast and getting out of there that the beginning, I handed him my camera and shot the first scene of me walking into the coffee house. And it took like maybe five minutes of filming.
I'm recording.
Recording?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
Okay. Perfect.
Because in my mind, I knew what I needed, and I didn't care if the camera was shaky or whatever. But it's just funny how, there's different ways of working, let's just say. And when you work alone, you're kind of just used to just doing things as fast as possible because you have to edit and there's so much to do to get a video out. So it was interesting to see how, the production was just a little different speed than I'm used to. Now, the second thing, what was funny was we headed to the second place, and here we weren't as lucky. I started filming the logo outside of the coffee house, and a woman comes walking straight out to the street and is like, "You can't shoot here." And it got a little confrontational. It was pretty interesting. The director, David, was so nice, and he was like, "Actually, we can. We're on the street. We could shoot in here." She's like, and I said, I told the woman, I'm like, I was about to go in and get a coffee. And she's like, "Well, if you leave your camera outside, you can come in." We were like, okay, we're not filming in this coffee house. They were so rude. But, and actually that coffee house was really beautiful. But it was too crowded, actually, thinking back. So things happen for a reason. So then we went to this other coffee house on the list called Black Fox Coffee. And this ended up being one of the winners because the number one latte art person was actually in-house. He was there that day, and he made me a little seahorse. And I asked, I'm like, "Hey, do you mind if I take pictures of my coffee and film it?" And they're like, "We don't care." So New York, they're like, "Whatever, you just bought breakfast here, do what you want." And I moved to the window area. I was getting a lot of natural light, and I was able to show off the camera, the XT50 here, the best. And David came in too. Actually, the whole crew came in at this point because there were chairs and everyone took a little bit of a break. And David captured me capturing the coffee stuff. And I think at this point I started to think about the story. Like I'm drinking coffee here. Maybe the music is getting a little faster. And so I knew I had to do a couple of different takes of like, this coffee. I'm drinking more and more, more coffee. If you haven't seen that video, by the way, it's linked up below. Then we went to Angelina's in Midtown Manhattan. And this was kind of a cute little French place that had macaroons. And I wanted to photograph them for their color. And boy, they were expensive. But Fujifilm was paying. I think they were like $4 or $5 each. So I got a lot of macaroons to photograph. And here, again, David walked in second here because we had recently been rejected. We wanted to be a little bit more cautious. But the person working that day was just fantastic. They let us do what we wanted to do. The only negative was that I asked for some latte art, and she was not skilled at all. And she said I'm the worst at it. And I'm like, do whatever. It doesn't matter. But she made some kind of like, it's like a comma, I think, or something. But it was totally fine. We didn't care. This was about the macaroons, and I was able to. This was the challenge too. Was I'm getting captured creating. I am thinking about my movie. I also need to think about the photographs. I need to think about showcasing the film simulation wheel. So I'm shooting the macaroons in all kinds of different film simulations. Gosh, and I'm also trying to, make sure that David's getting what he's getting, what I'm getting, what Fujifilm is getting. And overall, it completely worked, which was fine. But it definitely, like, my creativity, skill, and everything was like on 11. This was the end of day one for me in the morning. In the evening, I was going to meet the crew in New Jersey. Luckily, the helicopter was over in New Jersey, where I'm from. The idea was to capture the city overhead with the 500 millimeter lens. Now, GFX 100S Mark II is a very heavy camera. The 500 millimeter relatively light for its size, is bulky, and you're moving around in a helicopter and your shutter speeds need to be high. My video was also about the XT50, so it was a little stressful here, the helicopter ride. But what was interesting is you were only allowed one camera strapped around you, which was going to be a challenge because I needed to use the XT50 for my video. I also needed to use the X100, the GFX 100S Mark II for Fujifilm, but I also had to sort of videotape myself. So I came up with this genius. I used a double strap by Optech USA. So I had the XT50 in with the kit lens. That was the other thing I had to showcase. On the left side and on the right side, I had the GFX. So I had two cameras strapped to me. And then to film myself, I actually used the Insta360 camera. Was the only way that I could have captured myself. And that worked out really well, is to show off the helicopter ride and also have it turn around and look at my big egghead in 360 magic. So the helicopter ride, the helicopter took off, and I also, again, had to think pictures, photos, try to enjoy the view, but also acting. I had to sort of scream and sort of, because I knew in my story, I was like, how am I going to fit this helicopter into my video? And my idea was that I get so hopped up on coffee that I just end up on this helicopter, like I'm going to do something wild. And I would say my GFX photos, they were fine. It was interesting to capture the city from above, but I don't think that was my best work. It was just the helicopter ride went so fast. It just circled around Manhattan. We went through Central Park. We came down. I felt like it was like 15, 20 minutes. And I was just firing away like a like a madman, trying to get as much as I could. So it was pretty interesting. And then day 2 was supposed to be start the morning capturing the rest of my coffee video. So like a few more coffee houses. And then we were going to go to Coney Island and then maybe go to Brooklyn for a few more coffee places. So it was going to be a super long day. But I got to the city early and I thought, I'm here about an hour early. Let me just finish what I need for my video. I had a shot list and it was get a little bit more coffee, photograph a little bit more, and I needed to see the transition from getting coffee, me getting more and more hyper. And I also needed a transition to get to the end, which was the helicopter. And so I had a pamphlet from the helicopter company, and that sort of worked. That idea worked to link me to get to the helicopters in my story. And so I ended up just shooting everything myself before meeting up with the crew. And that kind of saved a lot of time. And we just head to Coney Island. And that took forever, by the way. Going in a car to Coney Island in the middle of the day, not recommended. Mass transit, people. Mass transit. So Coney Island was more Jeffrey's thing, but I still enjoyed photographing the oldness of Coney Island. And I tried to do a few more slices as well. And also here I tested the film simulations a little bit more. So I was able to get more photos while Jeffrey was sort of filming his stuff off, to the side there. And after we filmed in Coney Island, we were supposed to head to Brooklyn, and I kind of nixed it. Everyone seemed like they were exhausted and tired, even though David would have kept just like filming forever. He was just so good. He was ready to go to Brooklyn, but I kind of let everyone off the hook. I said, listen, I got everything I need. We got the slices. I got my story. If you got everything you need, we're good. And Jeffrey said the same thing, and everyone was super happy. We worked so hard that day and a half that it was really nice to sort of wrap. Now, the other person I enjoyed hanging out with this whole time, we had the Hassan, the sound guy, the production guys were great, David, of course, but Justin, who is the senior project manager for Fujifilm, he's kind of like the North American top person who knows how the cameras work, like, what features they have and, what it's like to dive in the menu and the focus modes and all that stuff. So he and I kind of just had a fun time like quoting movies, and we also like photographed together.
And camera speed.
So while Jeffrey in Coney Island was doing his own thing, we were hanging out and doing our own thing. So that was really nice. And that was the best thing. It got me out of the house, got me away from just being a blob, and collaborating with others and completely creating with others was just worth a suitcase worth of cash. Or is it? We should probably talk about that. So what if this video was sponsored? I think this is where I want to hear from you guys. Maybe leave a comment in the YouTube video. And I think I'm going to make another video about this because I've been writing down a lot of ideas about, bias, camera companies, sponsorships, and how YouTube has changed in the last few years. How it used to be a place of innocence and sharing, and now is, buy my this, buy my that. So what if this was sponsored? If it was sponsored, then that's okay. I don't think a lot would have changed, except I made videos on the XT50 and I critiqued the XT50 and the GFX 100S, the positives and negatives. And I think if you're being sponsored, it's a little hard to do that. I think if a company's paying you, I think they're paying you to promote the product. But with that said, you guys have been around here long enough that you know me. And so if I am sponsored, and like rarely is anything sponsored on this channel, do you trust? I mean, I think that is kind of hard. And I also would be torn if it was a sponsored video. It's just, I don't know. It just brings up a insane dilemma of integrity, trust, biased. If money's being exchanged, are you going to trust me? If I tell you that the little film simulation dial is the best thing since sliced bread, that gets to be a little tricky. And I sort of knocked the film simulation dial, how I wish it could save your recipes and how maybe it could be programmed for something else. But so I'm still kind of torn about it because it is an opportunity to, have passive income, but it also is, you got to think about, are you selling your soul a little bit? But it also is, are you being taken advantage of? Now, in this situation, I didn't feel like I was being taken advantage of by Fujifilm. Like I said, I've had a relationship with them. They've sent me cameras. I've started my channel with Fujifilm, so there's a little bit of like, hey, let me give back to you. But it also does bring up the discussion is the company making out more than I am when it comes to selling cameras? And let's face it, that's what this is all about, to get you guys to see the camera, to be excited about the camera and put it in your cart. And being on the panel for B&H was that you would put it in the B&H cart and buy it there. So it's very interesting that this is where we are now in YouTube land. Is companies are very savvy at providing a lot, providing trips, providing gear, providing dinners, trips, and did I say trips twice? Maybe, but because they send you twice. I think that it is an interesting discussion for one. Two, it's not an easy answer. It's easy for us to say, no, don't be sponsored, don't be paid. But honestly, you can't really disparage anyone's, way to make a living. As long as they're upfront and disclose, then, we have to use our sort of judgment when we watch a review video and sort of try to pick out the biases and all that stuff. So it's a very interesting discussion, and I would love to hear from you guys. Did I get the short end of the stick? Did Fujifilm outmake more? Did I make out more getting off my couch? It's a super interesting discussion. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe to my podcast and my channel here, and I'll see you guys next time.
I'm just trying to avoid the Toto toilet sign back there.
Oh, I like Toto toilets. What do you mean?
I love them as well.
Everyone needs a bidet.